Hello, I'm Alice with Wild and Woolly. Today I'm going to talk with you about English paper piecing, which began in England in the late 1600s. We have examples in the Charleston Museum that were done in the 1700s and 1800s. It's called paper piecing because ladies would take pieces of paper, not this big, I'm sure, and back then, and they would fold or baste fabric around these pieces and then sew them together. We're lucky today because we have pre-cut, pre-made templates that we can fold our fabric around. But it was so interesting to look at the back of to look at the back of the front and see that those ladies would cut shapes out of sheet music, letters that they had gotten in the mail, bills, any paper that they didn't need to save. What I do usually is I take my hexagon, and that's the most common shape used in paper piecing, and I take my hole puncher and I punch a hole in the middle, and you'll see why. And I try to cut more than 1/4 of an inch all around the edge of my shape. Then if you're going to do another shape, you can just move them down your strip. Now, you're going to baste your fabric around your shape. Some people use a glue stick, and we've got, at the shop, we have two. This is a Fons and Porter glue stick, and this is a Roxanne glue stick. I, and a lot of people, use a needle and thread. I use a needle and thread to baste my fabric onto the shape. Fold two sides down and secure. Fold it down. Move over to the corner. Secure. And you see that I did pin my hexagon to my fabric just so it would stay in place while I did this part. Some people like to take a stitch in the middle here through the paper, but I don't feel that that's necessary with this size or smaller. And if you do that, then you've got to go back and take out all that basting thread when you get through sewing your little pieces together. And there you go. Now I've already prepared that we can use right sides together to hold these two pieces together while we sew. This could be my center. And now I've made extra little pieces. And I want to start my flower garden block. Sew them together. And we've got these nifty little package of 3 different sizes of these little magnets. I really like those. The circles are good too. Anyway, we have these for sale at the shop. That keeps your pieces secured. I have a knot in my thread, and I'm going to sew these 2 pieces together. Sometimes you'll go through the cardboard edge, but that's okay. You would take smaller stitches that I'm doing, but I'm going to go a little bit faster so you can see. This is a wonderful project to do in the car, to do at night while you're watching television. It's something that you can just pick up and put down between other projects that you're working on. All right, I've come to the edge of that. I'm going to remove my magnets. And let me tell you, they are strong. Open it out, and it's sewn together. Now, I'm going to sew the next one on the same way. Put my magnets. Now I wanted to say again that I am probably taking bigger stitches than you would want to take. The needle I'm using is a milliner's needle. It's long and thin to get your thread through. Size 10, John James milliner's needles. The thread I'm using is polyester, because polyester is going to be stronger than cotton in the long run. My grandmother would say that I was whipping these pieces together, the whipping stitch. Now, I've got my second piece. All right, I'm going to put this aside and show you one that I've gone all the way around. And now I'll show you why it's wonderful that I put that hole, because it would be so hard to, we've got to sew these sides together now to make our flower garden. So now I take, usually I've got a small pair of scissors, but see, if I just stick it right in there, I can pop this out very easily. Now, you notice that I did not pop out my center until I had it completely surrounded by pieces that still had their paper in it. Now you can easily fold it the way you The way these templates are measured is by the length of a side. You see this pack of templates? They're called 1 1/4 inch hexagons because the size of your hexagons are labeled by the size of a side. This is a 1 1/4 inch hexagon because the side is 1 1/4 inches. Okay, I have done one little leg. I got one little side. You see how that's not going to move. Then you would do this one and this one all the way around, and you would have the beginning of a grandmother's flower garden. You can go from there, and then you can add other pieces around. You can make pathways in your flower garden. See how this is supposed to be a pathway around the flower bed. Grandmother's flower garden. Or, which I've done, you can make your flower garden and you can applique it to a piece of fabric and then sew your pieces of fabric together. But remember, you've got to take out your papers before you applique them. I want to show you my box where I keep I make my hexagons up, and then I just keep them in a box, and then I pull them out when I'm ready to sew. These I'm just going to sew them all together. I'm making sections that I can sew together, and I'll just make a quilt that doesn't really have any design or pattern. I've seen people who did this and made I Spy quilts. Each little thing that they cut out, they might have had a frog in here, or they might have had a flower, or just little things, bugs, and make I Spy quilts. I've shown you my grandmother's flower garden. This is a baby quilt I made out of what I would call a parallelogram. And we have these at the shop. These are a little bit smaller. And I made this baby quilt, and what I did to finish it is I just flipped it like a pillowcase. I turned it inside out, and here I had to hand stitch a piece, but and then I tied it. You don't necessarily have to quilt your quilts. And I used 30s and 40s reproduction fabrics. This is a tablecloth. I didn't put batting in this one, but I used the giant hexagons and dear old Cave facet fabric, which lends itself so well to these big hexagons. This one at the house. Now this is one of the first ones I made. My flower garden. Remember how I said you could applique it to a square? And this fabric lends it. When you look at it, you can hardly see the seams, but these were appliqued to a square of fabric. And you see here, I did a print and then a solid and then prints around. So I've got 3 rows of flowers. And then I sewed my flowers, still sewed my blocks together. And I appliqued this down with the blanket stitch. So they're just so many things you can do and so much fun you can have. Now, there was a lady who lived from 1892 until 1990, and her name was Lucy Boston. And she made a patchwork of crosses quilt, which has become very popular lately. And you can see that the blocks are crosses. I've made 2 blocks. And if we turn these over, you can see I did use glue because when they get so tiny, glue works very well. When you're finishing your quilt, you see how I cut off a square. You can do that. You can cut it off and you can bind it. I added borders. Grandmother's flower garden. This is the way I finished the edge, so that you don't lose your wonderful edges of all those hexagons that you've made. Although you can just cut them off evenly. Enjoy this project because it's just something that you can just work on off and on when you feel like it. Thank you. Come into the shop. We'll be happy to talk. Get you started. I wanted to show you my ball. This is not a hexagon. It's a 5-sided template. It's a pentagon, and we can order pentagon templates, and you can make a baby ball. They're lots of fun to make. You do it the same way that you sew these little pieces together, the same way that you do your hexagons. You just leave a little flap open and stuff with stuffing, and then you sew it. You whip it by hand on the outside. Sometimes you can buy little cat toys that have bells in them to put in the middle of these, so they'll rattle and make a noise. This would be a fun project too.